So, an astonishing evening to everyone. I hope that everyone has a great night or day. So, now let's tackle about the chapter 3, which is teaching and assessing poetry. So, we have encountered poetry, right? So, poetry, it is like a music. It is the language of the soul. Why so? Because it expresses our thoughts, our emotions that we find so difficult to put into ordinary words. That is why when we are in pain, when we are in love, or we are happy, we had that reflection about life, we resort to writing poems or poems. Because in that sense, there is an avenue to write those unspoken words that we have. Next is compared to prose. Poetry is considered more as a complex literary form by many, especially for students who are learning it as a part of their English subject. The challenge posed to every teacher is to motivate students to love poetry as a literary form that excites their senses. Kasi yung prose, di ba, it's a natural flow of speech. There is no use of metrical structure or rhyme. However, yung poetry, it can be so intimidating because it use figurative language, symbolism, in a sense that you are required or you have to decode to know what are those underlying messages. What does it mean about the certain poem? So, teachers must present poetry not just as a subject to study, but as an experience that helps the students to stimulate their senses and emotions. By doing so, poetry becomes meaningful and relatable rather than confusing or distant to the part of the students. In this chapter, pre-service teachers will learn the following essentials in the teaching of poetry, such as for the lesson 1, we have comprehending poetry, for the lesson 2, the strategies in teaching and assessing, then lesson 3, designing a learning plan, and lesson 4 is all about interactive poetry teaching. Now, let's proceed to the competency 1, which is the comprehending poetry. So, understanding a literary piece like that of poetry may sound difficult to students. To ease that difficulty, the teacher must engage on the peculiarity of poetry through competency-based learning materials that allow the students to embrace the different genres with the poetic devices that come with their creation. So it means that understanding poetry may be difficult for students, especially for those who are not very much inclined when it comes to poetry because of how it uses figurative language, symbolism, non-literal meanings, so it can be so confusing for those other people. But as a teacher, if you are going to discuss poetry, you have to make sure and to engage them, to guide them through that difficulty. So, for example, this line from William Shakespeare, As You Like It, all the world's a stage. No, it does not mean a real stage, but suggests that life is like a performance where people play different roles. So to make this easier, the teacher must guide the students in terms of exploring what makes poetry unique instead of simply giving answers. Let them discover, let them have a first-hand experience to know ano ba talaga yung meron sa poetry. Using competency-based learning materials also help the students to learn step by step. The adage that says, you cannot teach what you do not have, is true in its sense. While one's knowledge of the subject matter is considered important, how to make learning possible with the aid of the right materials and resources is indispensable in the delivery of instruction. So it means that teacher must first have a strong understanding of the subject matter before they can effectively teach it to the students. So in the context of poetry, now this implies that you as a teacher, you should be familiar with its forms, genres, poetic devices, so they can confidently or you can confidently guide your learners. Kasi having knowledge alone is not enough. You as a teacher may understand poetry, but if you cannot explain it in a clear and engaging way, students may still struggle. That is why the use of those appropriate teaching materials and resources is a very important thing to do in instruction. So instead of you explaining it simply, you can show examples and allow your students to analyze the poems step by step. So, poetry is considered the oldest form of literature. It is as old as history. So, it has three main genres, such as narrative, lyric, and dramatic. So, when we say narrative poems, those are the poems that tell a story. They have the story elements such as characters, setting, plot, and theme. They include the following. So, first is the allegory. Allegory is a narrative poem that uses an extended metaphor to make a point. So, an example here is the Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. So, are you familiar with it or no? So, this poem is an allegory of a man's spiritual journey. Si Christian, which is the main character, represents every person seeking salvation. Next is ballad. So it's a narrative poetry that can be sung. So example is Florante at Laura by Francisco Balagtas. So we are quite familiar with it. No, it's a Filipino narrative poem written in verse. It's all about Florante's struggles, love, and betrayal. So it has rhythm, musicality, making it suitable for recitation. So another example is the rhyme of the An Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Next is burlesque. Is a mock epic poem presented in a melodramatic way. Example is The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope. So it's a simple event like cuttings of a woman's hair, as if it were a grand heroic battle. So it uses epic language to make small issue seem very, very important. Next is an epic. No, it's a long narrative poem that tells a story of a legendary hero. Example here is the Biag ni Lamang. No, it's all about his extraordinary abilities, his adventures, the seeks of revenge for his father. No. Next is the Iliad by Homer. It's a Greek epic about the Trojan War. It's all about Achilles, Hector, Paris, and all of those things. It's all about Troy, the Trojan Wars, the themes of honor and glory. So those are parts of the narrative poems, and the other types of poetry will be discussed or tackled by Lester Labrado.
Greetings to everybody. This is Ray Luster C. Labrado, and now allow me to share another genre of poem. Let's talk about lyric poems. Lyric poems are meant to be sung and use emotional, song like language. They describe a moment, object, feeling, or person. So basically, lyric poem is resonated with a song, which is sung with emotion and feelings. After defining what lyric poem is, let's now talk about the different types of lyric poems. First is the riddle. It is a short, puzzling poem that asks a question. It is about a tricky questions that a people and a student has to answer. Next is the elegy, a song poem honoring the dead. So elegy is for the dead. It is honoring the dead. Next is the haiku, a 17-syllable poem using nature imagery to express emotion. When we say nature imagery, it talks about the nature elements, such as the landscapes, the mines, and everything, like water, sunlight, and air. Next is the sonnet, a 14-line poem in a specific rhyme scheme. Shakespearean, A B A B C D C D E F E F G G. Petrarchan, A B B A A B B A D E D E D. Now, let's talk to another genre type about poem. This is about dramatic poems. So, what is dramatic poems? A dramatic poems express a character's point of view, written from the perspective of a character in a story. So, basically, dramatic poems encirculates about the character's mindset, actions, feelings, and emotion. After defining what dramatic poem, let's talk about its types. First is the monologue. So what is a monologue? A speech by one character to another or the audience. It talks about the conversation of people in between, whether two people are talking or people or a person is talking to the audience. That is what we call a monologue. Number two is the soliloquy, a speech where a character talks to himself, herself, revealing inner thoughts, just like what we do every day. I talk to myself in the mirror. That's all for today. I hope everyone learned something from me. Once again, this is Ray Lester Celebrado. Study smart and be smart. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, good evening, especially to you Sir Maligon. I am Keisha Joy Emisahon and I will be discussing the devices that create rhythm. So we have 5 devices, namely iamb, trochee, spandi, dactyl, and anapist. But first, let's identify what rhythm is and what role does it play in the poetry. Rhythm. In English poetry, it refers to the stressed and unstressed syllables. Foot refers to the unit of each pattern. Rhythm is an audible pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables that creates a poem's beat, flow, or tempo. It often acts like a musical rhythm to convey emotion and tone. Foot rhythm, on the other hand, this refers to the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line. It is the combination of stressed and unstressed syllables. These patterns are called metrical feet, and they create the rhythm or beat when a poem is read aloud. Now, let's define what is stressed and unstressed. Stressed is it is pronounced with more force, higher pitch, or longer duration, forming the basis of rhythm. It is the long sounding of the syllable. For example, in a line of poetry, if the second syllable is stressed, you should give emphasis or a longer sound to the second syllable. Another example is the word above. In this word, the stress is on the second syllable, so you emphasize the second syllable. Unstressed, on the other hand, is the opposite of stressed. The syllables or words pronounced with less emphasis, lower volume, short duration, and often a lower pitch compared to stressed. It's a short sounding. Now, let's move on to the devices. First is the iamb. It is the most commonly used rhythm consisting of two unstressed and stressed syllables. So the structure is unstressed syllable followed by stressed syllable. In an iamb, the first syllable is unstressed, so it is pronounced with a shorter, softer sound. The second syllable is stressed, so you place emphasis on it. So, for example, in the word amuse and delight. So, both word amuse and delight, the stress is on the second syllables. So, it is pronounced as amused and delight. So, the main example here is the Sonnet 116 of Shakespeare. And as you can see, there is an underline syllable, so that underline is the stressed where you give emphasis when you read it. Now let's read it. Let me, not to the marriage of true minds. Next is the true key. So true key is a metrical foot that is opposite to iamb. Their similarities is that they have two syllables, but their differences is that in the true key, the first syllable is the stressed one, where you give emphasis or long sound, and in the second syllable is the unstressed. So the structured is stress to unstressed. So example is the word highway. In the word highway, the stress is in the first syllable. So it is pronounced as highway. Highway. So the example here is from Longfellow, The Children's Hour. So let's read it. Between the dark and the daylight. Next is the spondy, which is a metrical foot that has two syllables that are consecutively stressed. The structure stressed and stressed. Spondy comes from a Latin word spondius. It originally referred to the music that was made alongside libations or offering to gods. So spandi is rare, but writers use it regularly as part of other metrical patterns to change the rhythm of a line, to create a dramatic effect, or to have a dramatic pace in a poetry. Some example words of spandi is the word heartbreak and downtown. So spandi, both syllables are stressed. So to give emphasis to the word, which is the both syllables are stressed, so it is pronounced as heartbreak, downtown. So our main example here is from Poe in his work Annabel Lee. So let's read it. It was many and many a year ago. Next is the dactyl. Dactyl is made up of three syllables. The first is stressed and the remaining two syllables are unstressed. So the structure is stressed followed by unstressed and unstressed. To remember dactyl, it is a finger. Just as a finger is composed of a long joint that extends from the base of our hand, followed by two smaller joints. So the long joint here is the stressed one, where you give emphasis, and the two smaller joints are the two unstressed syllables. Our word examples here are poetry and fabulous, and the stressed are in the first syllables and the two remaining syllables are unstressed. Poetry, fabulous. Our main example here is from the line of Tennyson in his work The Change of the Light Brigade. So as you can see, there is an underlined word that is the first syllable, which is the stressed one, and the two remaining syllables are the unstressed one. So let's read it. Half a league, half a league. The last device we have is the anapest. Anapest is the opposite of dactyl. It consists of three syllables. The first two syllables are unstressed and the last syllable is stressed. So the structure is unstressed followed by unstressed and stressed. Our word example is unaware. And in this word, the stress is in the third syllable and the first two syllable is the unstressed. So let's read it. Unaware, unaware, unaware. Our main example is from the line of Byron in his work The Destruction of Sennacherib. And as you can see, the underlined syllable is placed on the third syllable, which is the stressed one, and again the first two syllable are the unstressed. So let's read it. like the leaves of the forest when summer is green. Thank you everyone for participating and listening to my discussion. I hope that you learned something, and I want you all to remember that these devices that create rhythm are very essential in poetry, and it will guide us to teach our children someday how to read poetry with the stressed and unstressed, and to use these five devices. And yeah, thank you.
A pleasant evening to each and everyone. I am Apelin B. Julian, and tonight I will be presenting the devices that enhance meaning. So, I assume that everyone is familiar with figures of speech. The figures of speech are poetic devices that enhance the meaning of a poem. But how does figure of speech enhance meaning in poetry? Here is how. Figures of speech enhance a poem by transforming ordinary language into something vivid, emotional, and meaningful. So, figures of speech, it brings life to the words that we are reading, where it helps us to really incorporate the words that we read into our lives. It adds emotions to the words and makes us feel the meaning and not just read it. It also makes the poetry rich in meaning where we can interpret it in ways that connects with our own experiences or real life. So tonight, let's focus on these five types of figures of speech: the simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, and hyperbaton. First is the simile. It is the direct comparison of two unlike things or objects using as or like. So we have here our first example, a poem as lovely as a tree. So as we can see, a poem and a tree, two different objects are being compared using the word as. Now, let's discover what does this line means. So this line is in the first stanza of Tree by Joyce Kilmer. So Kilmer is saying that no human-made poem can ever match the beauty of a real tree. While poets can write beautiful words, nature created by God or a higher power is still greater. So that is the message of the poem. So the second example, each like a corpse within its grave until. So each and corpse are being compared using the word like. The word each can represent people, and the line means that they are as motionless and lifeless as dead bodies in graves, at least for now. It might sound dark at first, but it's actually part of a larger idea about change, death, and renewal. Shelley is describing dead leaves lying on the ground in autumn. He compares them to corpses in graves, lifeless and buried. This imagery represents death and decay in nature, and this also reflects the cycle of death, change, and rebirth. So here is Tree by Kilmer and Ode to the West by Shelley. Now let's proceed to a metaphor. So a metaphor, it indirectly compares two unlike objects. So unlike simile, which directly compares two different objects by using as or like, metaphor indirectly compares two unlike objects. In this first example, it is the star to every wandering bark, a line from Shakespeare's Sonnet 116. The star is indirectly being compared to a wandering bark without using as or like. In this piece by Shakespeare, love is being compared to a star that guides lost ships. Even when people feel confused, lost, or uncertain, true love remains constant and helps guide them in the right direction. Now, let's proceed to the second example. The morns are meeker than they were. So the line, "the morns are meeker than they were," is from Emily Dickinson, works as a metaphor with social commentary rather than a literal statement. Dickinson is reflecting on how mothers or women in general may have become less assertive or less strong willed over time, possibly due to social expectations or changing rules in society. Now, here are the poems. Next is personification. So it gives human attributes to inanimate objects. So, for example, like the maple wears a gayer scarf. So, still, it is from Emily Dickinson. Dickinson is describing how the maple trees change in autumn when their leaves turn bright red, orange, and yellow. It is personification because it is a human act to wear something. Next example for personification is the waves beside them dance but they. So it is from William Wordsworth. So they incorporated verb which is dance to the wave. As we know, only humans can dance. It is a human act to dance and they incorporated it to a wave. And so it is personification. Now, it is from William Wordsworth poem. This poem means that even though nature is full of energy and beauty, the speaker at the moment does not fully share that joy yet. However, later in the poem, this memory of nature becomes a source of happiness when he is alone. So, here is the poem. Now, let's proceed to hyperbole, noted for the use of exaggerations, making the impossible seem possible. Just like this example by still William Wordsworth, they stretch in never ending lines. So Wordsworth is emphasizing that nature is beautiful and vast, that it feels like it has no ending, like it's an exaggeration. The beauty of nature, it's an exaggeration of the beauty of nature. Next example, and the rocks melt with the sun. Now, this is from Robert Burns. It emphasized that even the strongest and the most permanent things in nature would change or disappear. But his love is still stronger and more lasting than anything else. This is Robert Burns' Red Red Rose. And now we will proceed to our last figure of speech, the hyperbaton. It defies conventions in writing just to suit the intended poetic rhythmic pattern. Now, an example of this is 10,000 saw I at a glade. So the sentence structure may seem like a hayward. The normal order would be I saw 10,000 at a glance. Now, Wordsworth reverses the word order for poetic effects. So that is hyperbaton. He is describing how he saw an immense number of daffodils all at once, emphasizing their vast quantity, the sudden overwhelming beauty of nature, the feeling that the scene is almost impossible to take in full. Example by William Shakespeare: love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. Now, the structure is slightly rearranged for rhythm and emphasis. So the normal idea for this one is love is not true love if it changes when circumstances changes. Right. So Shakespeare is defining true love. Real love does not change when situations change. It remains constant, steady, and faithful, even through difficulties or time. And that is for our topic about devices that enhances meaning. Thank you for listening, everyone. Let's have a quick activity. So all you need to do is you have to read this poem by Edgar Allan Poe, Annabel Lee, and then you will have to find figures of speech. And then after 5 minutes, I will call someone, and then you have to give me at least one figure of speech from the poetry.
So good evening everyone, my name is Casilina Ciliam and now let's proceed to the devices that intensify the mood. So figures of sound are the poetic devices used to build up dynamic outlook of poetic piece. So figures of sounds which are poetic devices that make a poem more expressive and emotional. These devices help create the mood or feeling of the poem by using special sound patterns. Through these sounds, readers can better imagine the scene and feel the emotion of the poet that he or she wants to show. Now let's proceed to the first device that intensify the mood. The first one is the onomatopoeia. It is the figure of sound that uses words that mimic the sound they present. So in short, onomatopoeia is a figure of sound that uses words that imitate real sounds. These words sound like the noise they describe, making the poem more vivid and realistic. It helps readers hear the action in their minds. For example, Howdy Clang and Clash and Roar by Edgar Allan Poe. So, the clang, clash, and roar, these words sound like loud metallic or crashing noises. Next one is the alliteration. Alliteration, it is a sound device that involves the repetition of the first consonant sound in multiple words within a line of the poem. In short, the alliteration is the repetition of the same beginning consonant sound in nearby sounds. This device gives the poem rhythm, musicality, and emphasis. It can also make lines easier to remember. For example, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping. The nearly napping repeats the end sound. Another meaning is, oh, my love is like a red, red rose. So the red, red rose repeats the R sounds. Next one is we have the assonance. Assonance is noted for the repetition of the same vowel sounds in the line of a poem. So assonance, it creates a smooth, flowing sound and adds musical effect to poetry. It can also express certain moods or emotions. For example, who knows why the cold wind blows? So that example repeats the O sounds. Next is we have the consonants. Consonants is, unlike alliteration, it repeats the middle and final consonants within groups of words within the line of a poem. So, consonance is a repetition of consonant sounds in the middle or at the end of words. Unlike alliteration, it does not focus only on the first letter sound. This device adds harmony and rhythm to the poem. For example, he gives him harmless bells a shake. That examples repeat consonant sounds like the harmless, bells, a shake. Another example here is if you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar. So the dreamer, wisher, liar, repeated ending sounds create effect. In conclusion, figures of sound are important elements of the poetry because they make poems more meaningful, musical, and expressive. Devices such as onomatopoeia, alliteration, assonance, and consonance help create mood, emphasize ideas, and make the poem more enjoyable to read or listen to. By using these sound devices, poets can bring their words to life and create a stronger connection with their readers.
Alright, so good day everyone. I am Marian Belgipo Balate and I will be continuing our report, which is the chapter 3, the teaching and assessment of poetry. So today I will be discussing the competency 2, which is the strategies in teaching and assessing poetry. So in this report, we will talk about different strategies that teachers can use to make poetry more engaging, meaningful, and easier for students to understand. So we will also look at the 3 sequence phases used in teaching poetry, which are the preparatory phase, interpretative phase, and the synthesis phase. But before that, let us first define what is strategies. So, according to the Oxford Dictionary, a strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a significant goal. So, in teaching, strategies refer how instruction is delivered to allow students to learn the content. These may also refer to the different engaging activities afforded by the teacher tailored to students' level competencies and learning style. So, in simple terms, when we say strategy, these are the methods that teachers can use to help students understand and enjoy learning. So, kung may ganitong strategies, these are the plan of action, or these are the techniques that the teacher use to achieve a significant goal. So, according to HISPER 1988, students will understand and appreciate literature when the strategies used to teach literary texts are within their level. So, this means that students can learn better when activities are not too difficult or too easy for them. So, the main goal here is not only for students to study literature, but also to enjoy it and see that literature connects to real life and human experiences. So it's really important, as a teacher, we should teach literature in a most engaging and fun way. Kaya dapat dili na to ipa-feel sa mga students nga studying literature is a burden, or they will just read literatures for compliance na lang. So it is really important as a teacher, we need to make students enjoy the literature, because ingon pagani diri the primary goal is to make the students enjoy as they learn literature as a vital and relevant aspect of human existence. One approach used in teaching literature is the humanistic approach. So in this approach, literature is not taught in a traditional way where students simply read and answer questions. So it posits the idea that interpretation of literary text must be dialectic process. So what does dialectic process means? So it simply means a way of thinking or learning where two opposing ideas are discussed. So in simple terms, it's like having a conversation between two different viewpoints to find the truth or a deeper meaning. So, for example, if one student says that school uniforms are good and another says school uniforms are not necessary, this is a dialectic process. It looks at both sides and helps you understand before forming a conclusion. So, humanistic approach, instead of teaching this in a traditional way, it uses dialectic process, that instead students are now encouraged to interpret the text, share their understanding, and connect it to their own thoughts and experiences. It's more on the interactive process where meaning is explored, not just given. So this helps students develop a deeper appreciation and personal engagement in the literary text. So now, literature and its genres undergo 3 sequent phases according to Harper 1988. So these are, first, the preparatory phase, second is the interpretative phase, and third one, or the last one, is the synthesis phase. So now let's discuss each phases. Alright, so for the first phase, it is the preparatory phase. So it consists of pre-literary activities that allow students to use their linguistic abilities for meaningful literary experiences. So the purpose of this phase is to activate the prior knowledge. Again, the purpose of this phase is to activate the prior knowledge, to build interest and prepare students for meaningful literary experiences. So from the word itself, preparatory phase. It is preparing students for a meaningful literary experience. So it helps students become ready to understand the themes, language, and ideas in the text before they actually read it. So, some of these activities to be used include identifying parallel themes with non-literary texts such as film or painting, describing a character or scenario through a words association, vocabulary building, pre-reading questions, guided role-playing, and etc. So, these activities will help students to connect with the text early on and make them more engaged before the actual reading begins. So, I have here an example activity. So, an example activity is titled Identifying Parallel Themes. So, as a teacher, you can make your students watch, or you can show students a scene from Inside Out before reading a poem about emotion. So now, after watching them, you can ask students, and the students can answer questions such as, what theme did you notice? Have you seen this theme in stories or poems before? Or predict if the literary text might contain the same theme. So this activity will help students connect ideas from a familiar media to the poem they will study. So for the second phase, it is the interpretative phase. So this phase allows students opportunities to express, negotiate, and refine their interpretation of the text. So this phase, this is where the students analyze the poem, discuss meanings, and share insights. So rather than just finding one correct answer, students are now encouraged to explore different interpretation and support their ideas. So sa interpretative phase, mag-interpret na ang mga students, mag-analyze na sila, no, mag-express na sila sa ilahang interpretation sa poem. So they will now discuss meanings and share insights. So in this dialogic process, the activities include dialogue techniques, sequence, personalized questions, strategies, rewriting e-text, oral presentations like choral reading, reading aloud, and spoken poetry. So these activities will help students or encourage students to actively engage with the text and develop a deeper understanding through discussion, performance, and interpretation. So I have here an example activity, which is a choral reading. So in this activity, students can read a poem together in groups using rhythm, expression, and emotion. So in the example, Keep Going, each group will read assigned lines, then all groups read the final part together. So this activity will help students understand the tone, mood, and meaning while also making poetry more interactive and collaborative. So after the choral reading, no, si teacher pwede po siya throw og mga questions sa mga students like, what are the tone of the poet, no? What are the mood nga mapansin sa poem nga ilang gibasa. So it will allow students to experience poetry not only through reading but also through performance. So after this choral reading, pwede sila maka-analyze na, maka-make discussions kung unsa ang mga tone, ang mood sa poetry. So the last phase is the synthesis phase. So this is the final stage that enables students to view text as a unique whole. So this phase, students can bring together everything that they have understood and respond to the literary work in a personal and creative way. So it focused not just on analyzing the poem but also on expressing how the text affected them. So sa synthesis phase, it is more on the reflective side of teaching literature. So it is more on the personal na ang mga students of unsa ilahang nasabtan sa poetry, how they will respond to the literary work in a personal and creative way. So si synthesis phase, more on the reflection na siya, commenting on the poet's work. So the activities that could be used using the synthesis phase is writing a reader's response, differentiated outputs, or others that will enable them to express how specific works affect them and foster their creativity. So sa synthesis phase, again, it is more on the personal note nga mag-enable siya sa students to view text as a unique whole, no? It should bring students to understand and respond to the literary work in a personal and creative way. Right, so I have here an example for the synthesis phase. So it is entitled The Literary Reflection Comment. So now students can write a comment about the poet's message, style, or impact using guide questions such as what image is the poet trying to convey? What did you admired about the poem? How did the poet's use of words or imagery help deepen the meaning of the poem? So it's more on the reflective side. Alright, so again, when we say preparatory phase, it is more on the preparation to activate the prior knowledge of the students. When we say interpretative phase, it is more on the students will now interpret the poem, no? They will discuss with their group, and then the synthesis phase is now applying what you understand during the reading of poems. So you will now reflect how the poem affected you as a person. Right, so to sum it up, in conclusion, effective strategies in teaching poetry helps make learning engaging, meaningful, and student-centered. So through the preparatory, interpretative, and synthesis phases, students are now guided from preparation to interpretation and finally to create a creative response. So these strategies will help students not only understand poetry better, but also appreciate its value as they connect ideas, emotions, and personal experiences within the text. So in this way, poetry becomes more than just words on a page, but a meaningful learning experiences that encourage deeper reflection and expression. Alright, so that's all for my part. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. My name is Luwala Gino Laging, and today I will be continuing the report for the Competency 3, that is designing a learning plan and teaching poetry. So first, designing a learning plan is a very crucial step in ensuring effective teaching, especially in a subject as expressive and interpretative as poetry. But before discussing how to design a learning plan in teaching poetry, let's have first a recap or a discussion about what is a learning plan. So we have here learning plan. A learning plan is an indispensable tool that enables teachers to carry out their classroom activities effectively, which means that it is not just a simple guide, but a structured plan that shows what students are expected to learn within a certain time. It also explains how the lesson activities will support or scaffold learning, meaning they are arranged from simple to more complex tasks. Moreover, it includes assessment methods to measure whether students have achieved the learning objectives. It says here, teaching is challenging, so it takes your passion to stay in this profession, which is very true. Because creating a learning plan can be tiring because it involves careful preparation and thinking. However, it is very important also because it serves as the teacher's blueprint. Just like an architect, you cannot build a house without a plan. A teacher cannot effectively teach without a learning plan. So without proper planning, lessons may become unclear, disorganized, and ineffective for students. In designing a learning plan, the learners, being the target audience, are the primary consideration. Teachers need to have their learners in mind as they plan their lessons. A lesson should not be designed based only on the content, but on how students will understand and learn from it. For example, in teaching poetry, some students may need more guidance in interpreting poems, while others may be ready to create their own.
Next, we have analyzing the learners. Analyzing the learners is a key step in making an effective learning plan. According to Henich et al. 1999, teachers should examine different aspects of their students. First, they should look at the demographic profile, such as age, gender, family background, and even the social status, because this can affect learning experiences. Second, teachers should assess the learners' competency levels, including their knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Third is understanding the learning styles, whether students learn best through seeing, which is visual, hearing, and that is auditory, or doing, which is kinesthetic, which helps teachers choose appropriate teaching strategies. This is very important in poetry lessons because students can learn through reading, listening, performing, or even creating poems. Another important part of a learning plan is stating clear objectives in three domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The cognitive domain focuses on knowledge, such as understanding the meaning of a poem. The affective domain focuses on attitudes and feelings, such as appreciating the beauty of poetry. The psychomotor domain focuses on skills, such as performing or writing a poem. In learner centered teaching, objectives should come first before content. This means that teachers should first decide what students should learn and then choose the appropriate content and activities to achieve those objectives. Lastly, objectives should follow certain standards to make them effective. They should be SMART, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, results oriented, and time bound. This ensures that the objectives are clear and achievable. They should also promote higher order thinking skills, such as analyzing and creating, not just remembering. In addition, objectives should follow the ABCD format. This includes the audience, who will learn, behavior, what they will do, condition, which is under what situation, and degree, how will they should perform. This format helps teachers clearly define why they expect from students and makes it easier to assess learning outcomes. And that ends my part. Thank you for listening and have a good day.
A pleasant day to each and every one of us, especially to our dearest Sir Maligon. Today we are going to discuss the designing effective learning plans in teaching poetry. So as a future educator, effective teaching requires careful planning and thoughtful decision making. Selecting appropriate methods, media, and materials plays a vital role in helping students understand lessons more clearly and meaningfully. In delivering instruction, it is also important to ensure active learner participation and continuous evaluation of performance. So this presentation discusses how these elements work together and highlights the use of the Assure model as a guide in creating, engaging, and effective learning experiences. First is selecting the appropriate method. Choosing the right media, method, and materials is essential. So this must match your learning objectives. So as an educator, it is very essential or important to carefully select the method, media, and materials that match the learning objectives the students must attain at the end of the lesson. So these elements should work together to make learning meaningful and easier for students to understand or to grasp. So for example, if I am teaching a poem, I will not rely only on lecture. Instead, I may use a video, pictures, and group discussion so students can better visualize and interpret the poem. When these are aligned, students become more engaged and can connect ideas more effectively. Next is implementing the learning plan. So both teachers and students must prepare. So dili kailangan na ang teacher lang ang mag-prepare but also the students. So teacher needs practice and preparation. So the goal of this is to deliver a clear and powerful lesson. So in implementing the learning plan, so both the teacher and the students must be prepared. So as a teacher, kinahanglan ako mag-prepare sa ako ang lessons or mag-practice para ma-ensure na ako the materials are ready before the class starts. For example, before teaching, so I review my PowerPoint slides, check if the video works, and prepare extra activities in case of technical problems. So this preparation helps ensure a smooth and organized lesson delivery. So here are the 5 procedure in lesson implementation. So first, previewing the materials. Second is preparing backup plans. Third is preparing the environment. Fourth, preparing the learners. And the last one is providing the learning experiences. So there are important steps that we follow during implementation. So first, we review the materials to ensure accuracy and clarity, kung tama ba siya and concise. And second is prepare a backup plans such as printed copies in case technology fails. So kinahanglan jud na at prepare ta in case magkinaunsa. And third is prepare the classroom environment to make it conducive to learning. So, i-prepare na to where students are free or safe in the classroom. So, fourth is we prepare the learners by giving motivation or a short introduction. So, kinahanglan natin motivation pagka first, mga prayers, ganon. And last one is we provide the actual learning experiences through activities like group work or discussion. For example, we might ask students to interpret a line from the poem in groups. So, it is very important na ang atong ihatag sa ilahang mga example kay kanang connected in real life for them to mas makahatag sa ilaha og pagsabot and makonect nila into real life. Next is learners' participation. So active participation is very important in a classroom setting. It encourages students to engage in all activities and avoid long lectures. Focus on a student-centered classroom. So here the teacher is the facilitator. So learners' participation is essential in a student-centered classroom. As an educator, we encourage students to actively join discussion, share ideas, and participate in activities. For instance, instead of explaining the whole poem myself, I ask students to share their interpretations and relate the poem to their experiences. So this approach makes learning more interactive and meaningful rather than relying on long lectures and the students might feel bored. Next is evaluating performance. So this is the most critical part of lesson delivery because it measures the strength and weaknesses of the learners and measures how much learners have achieved. So this includes assessing learners, assessing teacher performance, checking the effectiveness of methods and materials. In short, evaluation is a very important part of teaching because it helps measure how much students have learned. So as a teacher, I assess not only the students' performance but also my own teaching strategies if it is effective. For example, after the lesson, I may give a short quiz or ask students to create a reflection about the poem. I also reflect on whether my teaching method was effective or if I need to improve it. The last one is the Assure model. So this is an instructional model for effective teaching. It ensures engaging and meaningful learning, helps organize lesson planning clearly. So this model is a guide that helps teachers plan and deliver effective lessons. So here are the Assure modal steps. So A is for analyze learners, S is for state objectives, S selecting methods, media, and materials, U is for utilize materials, R require learner participation, and E for evaluate and revise. So first is analyze my learners to understand their needs and abilities. Then, I state clear objectives the students must attain at the end of the lesson. Next, I select appropriate methods, media, and materials. After that, I utilize these materials during teaching. I also require active participation from learners. And finally, I evaluate and revise the lesson based on the result. For example, if students had difficulty understanding the poem, I may adjust my method by adding more visual aids next time. In conclusion, effective teaching requires proper planning, appropriate strategies, and active students' involvement. By carefully selecting methods and materials, encouraging participation, and evaluating performance, I can ensure that learning becomes meaningful and successful for my students. So that would be all my part. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Jezza Lagnason, and now let's wrap up the lesson about designing a learning plan in teaching poetry. As what the previous presenters emphasized, in designing a learning plan, it requires a careful alignment of objectives, strategies, the materials used, and assessment to create a meaningful learning experience. The teacher must ensure that the lesson is student-centered. So if we say student-centered, the teacher serves as the facilitator. It should be engaging and well-prepared, from previewing the materials and organize the environment to guide learners throughout the process. It is also emphasized that learning becomes effective when students actively participate rather than passively listen. The use of appropriate methods, media, materials such as guided reading of poems, and interactive questioning. So, in interactive questioning, you let the student to ask questions. So, in media, the teacher show visual aids like pictures, video clips, or digital presentations, and other resources like printed poems, worksheets, and vocabulary lists. So this approach serves as scaffolds to help learners better understand poetic concepts such as imagination, meaning, and interpretation. Most importantly, evaluating learners' performance and the effectiveness of the lesson itself is essential. This allows the teacher to determine whether the objectives are achieved and what improvements can be made. So, with that, we now move on to evaluation, or should we say, let's evaluate. Through this rubric presented in the screen, we will evaluate a sample lesson plan or a learning plan to see how well these principles are applied in practice. So this sample learning plan is presented by Miss Quinlin Maong. And that's all for my part.
So now let us move on to the designed instructional plan or the lesson plan itself. As you can see here, we have the competency and it focuses on English 7, okay? But before we delve into the lesson plan itself, we have first to know the rubrics, or what are the things that we need to do for us to get or to do a better or very good lesson plan. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the rubrics. Here's the rubrics that you need to follow. Here's the things that you need to do when designing
or making a detailed lesson plan. Okay, take a look. There are ratings there. There are very good, good, and NI. The criteria here, the objectives construction, the method, media, and material, or the 3M's selection, and of course, the method of assessment. So, this is the detailed lesson plan in English 7. Take a look. This is the example of detailed lesson plan in English 7. So let's go delve into this and know what are the things that we need to put in our detailed lesson plan. So as you can see, the topic here, differentiating reality and fantasy. We have here the learning areas is English 7 under quarter 4. Duration is 60 minutes. So the first is the learning competency. Is to differentiate reality and fantasy based on the material viewed. So the main competency, of course, of this lesson is to help students identify whether events or actions are real or imaginary. This skill improves their understanding of stories and develops their critical thinking. So next, take a look. We have the key concept, which is understanding reality and fantasy in literature. Please read the key concept here. And of course, for them, you have to, for the students, you have to teach them the reality is based on facts and true events. Reality is based on imagination. Fantasy is based on imagination and cannot happen in real life. Learning both helps students appreciate literature and culture. So students learn to recognize the difference between realistic and imaginative events in stories, which helps them better understand literature. So next, we have here the content of our detailed lesson plan. First is the learning objectives. We have 4 of it. The knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. As you can see there, for knowledge, differentiate fantasy from reality. The skills, you can make your students tell whether an action or event is realistic or fanciful. The attitudes, you make your students explain the importance of reality and fantasy in our lives. And the values, of course, build good relationships through cooperation and participation. Okay, these objectives guide what students should know, do, and value after the lesson. Okay, so next is we have our resources needed. As you can see there, we have the lesson plan, laptop, Wi-Fi, pen, and notebook. Okay, so under the methodology part or the preparedness, we have here. First, let us know why we need this, because these materials support the teaching and learning process and help deliver lesson effectively. So here, the methodology, the preparedness for the 10, we have the preliminary activities. Okay, under there we have the prayer, greetings. This for the preparedness part. Greetings, checking of attendance, presentations of objectives. Okay, these activities prepare students mentally and emotionally for learning and set the tone for the lesson. Okay, next is we have the activity. Under that, we need 50 minutes for that. Okay, the activity is this one. Okay, the students will identify pictures as fantasy or reality. The examples are Cinderella, Spider-Man, a woodcutter, and a real person. Okay, this activity engages students and activates their prior knowledge by allowing them to classify pictures. Okay, another part, as you can see here, the vocabulary development, wherein here's are the vocabulary words. We have the vanished, woodcutter, sausage, complaint, kingdom, and kingdom. Okay, take a look. This. Is it clear? Yes, okay. Why we need this? Because students, in this way, our students can learn the meaning of new words to better understand the lesson and the reading materials. Next part is the analysis. As you can see there. Okay, the analysis here is fantasy is based on the author's imagination. It is set tone, while reality is based on facts and it is based on the true story. Okay, here fantasy is based on imagination, not true. Reality based on fact, and can happen in real life. Okay, this part helps students, and of course, help our students clearly understand the difference between fantasy and reality. Okay, so next one is the abstraction, one of the important part of the puzzle. Okay, so here's the guide question. As you can see there, we have the guide question. Okay, and the analysis, by the way, you need a you need 2 minutes for that. For abstraction, you need 7 minutes. So we have the guide question. Do you think learning fantasy and realities is important in learning the English language? This question will be asked to your students. So why? Because in this way, your students can reflect on the importance of distinguishing between real and imaginary events in stories and daily life. Okay, and we also have the practice wherein you have to allocate 10 minutes for the practice. Okay, wherein you need to group your students into pairs to answer the worksheets. You need worksheets for that. Why this is necessary? Because group work encourages cooperation, communication, and active participation. Next is the assessment part. Okay, we have students in the assessment part. You will gonna give your students, you're gonna have make them explain their no examples, give their own examples of fantasy and reality. In this way, you can check whether your students understand the lesson and can apply the concept in real life situation. We have next is the assignment, okay, wherein the students will research about analogy and write examples in their English notebook. Yes, there is an assignment part, but I don't know. I cannot put it here. I don't know, but there is an assignment part of that. But if you want, you can research for this another detailed lesson plan. Okay, in the lesson plan, it was included that the students will research analogy and write examples in their English notebooks. Okay, why this is necessary? Because this assignment extends learning beyond the classroom. Your students will extend their learning beyond the classroom and prepare them for the next lesson. So that's it for our detailed lesson plan in English.
Today, I will discuss outcome based education or OBE. OBE uses constructive alignment. This means learning outcomes guide both teaching and assessment so students can reach the expected skills. Teaching activities should be interactive, entertaining, and engaging. They help students actively participate and support their learning. The 3Ps plan include preparation, introduce and motivate, presentation, analyze the poem, and performance, apply learning through learning activities. Assessment should match the learning outcomes. The focus on student performance is showing what they truly learned or what they can show.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I will discuss how poetry can be taught through comparison using two sonnets, which is Sonnet 43, How Do I Love Thee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and Sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day by William Shakespeare. For the Sonnet 43 by Browning, this poem expresses deep and personal love. The speaker explains different ways she loves someone emotionally, spiritually, and even beyond death. Love is described as endless and unconditional. It shows strong emotion and sincerity, focuses on counting the ways of loving. So, in this poem, the speaker expresses deep and unconditional love. She explains the many ways she loves someone emotionally, spiritually, and faithfully. So the love described is pure, constant, and enduring beyond death. The poem focuses on intense personal feelings and sincerity shown through repetition and emotional language. For the Sonnet 18 by Shakespeare, this poem compares a loved one to a summer's day, but says the person is even more beautiful. Love is shown through comparison and imagery. It emphasizes beauty and immortality, and the poem suggests that love will live forever through poetry. So in this poem, the speaker compares the beloved to a summer's day but concludes that the person is more beautiful and more constant than nature. While summer fades, the beauty of the beloved will remain forever through the poem. It highlights the use of imagery and figurative language and the idea that poetry can preserve beauty and love over time. And for the similarities of the both sonnets, so both sonnets talk about love and admiration. They follow the structure of a sonnet and use figurative language to express deep emotions. Both poems show love as something powerful and meaningful. And for the difference lies in how love is expressed. Browning focuses on emotional and spiritual devotion, while Shakespeare focuses on physical beauty and uses nature as a comparison. Browning, pres- Browning presents love as eternal beyond death, while Shakespeare presents love as immortal through poetry. That's all. Thank you.
So good afternoon everyone. My name is Divema Liwanan, and then this evening today we're going to compare two famous love poems, Sonnet 43 and Sonnet 18. We'll use a Venn diagram to see how they are similar and different. So in the left circle, Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So the theme is deep, spiritual, and enduring love. The tone is intimate, sincere, devotional. And then the focus is expressing how much the speaker loves, quantifying love. So the imagery, soul, depth, height, everyday life, and then faith. And then the style, personal and emotional, repetitive structure. So I love thee. So the message is love continues beyond life or external love. So in the right circle, Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. So the theme is beauty, love, and immortality through poetry. The tone is admiring, confident, reflective. Focus, comparing the love to nature. So, summer's day. And then the imagery, sun, wind, summer, and nature. And for the style, it uses metaphor and comparison. So the message is poetry preserves beauty forever. So in the middle or the overlap, so the similarities of both poems are sonnets, 14 lines. Both focus on love and admiration. Both express the idea of lasting or eternal love. And then both use figurative language, imagery, and metaphor. And then both are written in formal poetic structure. So, what's the difference between the two? So, Browning measures love deeply from the heart, while Shakespeare's compare love to nature and makes it eternal through writing. That's all for my part. Thank you.